Hello, everyone. Today we shall be surfing not on the internet and on waves, but on the waves of innovation through human evolution. We shall be looking at how skills are born, how they evolve, and how they gracefully bow out of existence. Today's episode is about the next wave of innovation and skilling for the next wave of innovation. I have with me once again Mrs. Anita Karwar. So, welcome, Anita, to this podcast.
Hi, Anju. Thank you.
We can think of skills as a little bit like fashion trends. They come in and they go. Some are timeless, and some make you cringe when you think, what was I thinking? Yeah. So, to begin with, Anita, what skills do you think have become redundant in our times?
Anju, the common misconception is that skills only in education have become redundant. I want to say that many skills have become redundant all around in many professions. You take my profession, for example, which is bureaucracy. So we used to have fax machine operators, telephone machine operators. We used to have record keeping systems, with loads of paper inside large rooms.
Right.
We used to do paper files. We never had remote meetings. We had only physical meetings. So, lot of things that were there earlier have now become redundant, even in our profession.
Right. So I think it would be a good idea to actually look at a kind of a historic perspective and
Yes.
take the viewers through the cave paintings to cloud computing, the evolution of skills. So let's start with the beginning, the prehistoric age and the hunter-gatherers time. Okay, let's think if the performance metrics were about survival, then you would have the skills would be hunting
Without GPS.
without GPS, keep tracking and without Google Maps,
Yes.
probably, and tool making. Without before all those DIY YouTube tutorials invaded our homes.
Yes.
So let's say if there was a job interview, probably the question would be, "Hi, do you think you can sharpen a wooden stick and catch dinner for today?" And if the fellow says yes, you're hired.
Yeah. Interesting. So, after this hunter gatherer phase, the next phase of historical evolution of the human being was the phase of agriculture and agrarian societies. And this was actually marked by farming techniques, by trading, by community building, etc. And what we call as networking today, at that time, networking was about meeting your neighbors, knowing them, working with them as a community. So there was actually no question of these virtual connections. It was a real connection at that time.
A real human connection.
Yes.
And then after that age came the Industrial Revolution, and that got us into the machine age. So this machine age was more about precision, about repetitive work, about assembly line productions and processes, right? And that is a time I think when human beings began to compete with machines. And of course, the spoiler alert is that machines were winning.
All the time. And then after the machine age came the information age,
Right.
in which we are actually living. And this was the real, the digital rush. And when, and the age, it was marked by those supercomputers, which used to occupy these whole rooms and huge halls.
Right.
And which has now evolved into something which comes in your pocket. And your entire digital life is in your pockets, actually. So there has been a huge evolution since then.
And I think suddenly you can see that the hashtag grandma's recipes trending as senior citizens now even taking to the digital age
Yes.
and putting themselves out there.
Yes.
So actually each phase in the human evolution with the technology changes has brought in new skills for all of us. And it has evolved with the societal changes. So even in education now, for example, we have gone from holistic learning to test-taking marathons.
Yes.
And maybe we can begin with the Gurukul era, where that's where we can trace our education system from, where the focus was actually on wisdom and not really marks, which is the hallmark of our times. Yeah, so that time I think in the Gurukul era, the focus was so much on actually ethics, logic, immersive learning, philosophy. There was a connectedness with each other, with the community, with the environment. So the curriculum in a way was deeply emerging from the needs of the society.
Yes, it was connected to real life. And which Gurukul era was suddenly actually stopped as soon as the Britishers began colonizing India. And then the great clerical experiment started in
I like the term, the great clerical experiment.
experiment, yes. And in Macaulay's words, I'm just reading out, the idea of this education was to create people who are Indian in blood and color, but English in taste, in opinions, in morals, and in intellect. So, if you translate it into simplified language, they were looking for robots and not for, thinking people or people who had some kind of skills. The British rule therefore saw the bureaucratization of education and complete erosion of the autonomy of the teachers and even of individual institutions like schools.
Right. That's true. And that was also the time where the textbook culture came in. That's what Professor Krishna Kumar calls it, the textbook culture. And the textbook replaced the authority of the guru or the teacher as a sole authority of epistemic knowledge. So the textbook became the center of knowledge,
Yes.
not coming from the guru, but so decentralization, removing the importance of the guru or the teacher. So again, part of the colonial agenda.
In fact, this aspect of the colonial agenda continued post independence also, in which it was as if education was stuck up in a time warp.
Right.
And in this rote learning, it became like a national sport. And we are aware of that. And the skills required post independence till pre NEP was basically just rote memorization. That was a major skill required in the process of education. And textbooks became the only source of knowledge, true, prescribed source of knowledge, in fact. And so learning is not really considered a skill. Learning to learn was not a skill at all pre NEP.
Also, the source of knowledge was no longer important.
Yes.
There's only one source of knowledge. So you actually are unquestioning.
Yeah.
So you're not exploring around you. You're not even thinking about what you know or what others know.
Yes.
You're not able to even gain the knowledge from other sources. So that skill wasn't there because students learned to unquestioningly rely on this textbook as a source.
Yeah. And so what was happening actually was that a lot of innovation is taking place in the outside world, but education is not keeping pace with that. So, Anju, as you would know, that there have been 6 innovation cycles, um, which basically began in the 18th century. And prior to that, of course, there was innovation in the Bronze Age and the Fire Age, etc., etc. But we are talking about recent history. So, if you look at the first innovation cycle, which was of about 60 years, initially the innovation cycles were large. Large number of years were dedicated to those innovations. So, this began somewhere around 1780s. In this, the water power era, textiles and iron came in, and the real skills that were required at that time was engineering skills for designing these water wheels and mills, and maybe some basic literacy for following instructions. This was then followed by the second wave, which is the steam engine wave.
Right.
This lasted around 55 years. And here, metallurgical knowledge was very basic, which was required, and basic numeracy, full measurements. This was then followed by the third wave, wherein electricity, chemicals, internal combustion engine, these kind of things were discovered or invented. And here began the process of doing things in a standardized manner. So the skill that was required was standardization. And formal education slowly began to become important in the third wave. Then we came to the fourth wave. This started around 1950s and lasted around 30 years. And this was the wave of electronics and aviation and petrochemicals, when assembly line expertise was the major skill required. And technical college education assumed a huge importance. And then came the fifth wave with information technology, which went on till COVID time, 2020 tak. Isme digital literacy and higher education credentials became important. And now we are in the sixth wave. The fifth wave lasted just barely about 20-25 years. The sixth wave started in the 2020, and this is the digital era where AI, IoT, robotics, deep tech, etc. These are the important skills which are required these days. So, the associated major skills which students need to know are AI, machine learning, digital communication, remote collaboration, creative problem solving, ethical judgment and oversight, etc. So, look at this gamut. It's huge.
True. Yeah. Also, so what you're actually pointing out is the pace of change has accelerated. Yes, of course, this is now widely acknowledged, but this also means that the pace of change in our classrooms also has to match it
Yes,
because the problem is going slow.
yes, that is very slow. The problem is that it's very, very slow. Yes.
Right. Also, many of the other point that we are making is that certain skills have become redundant. Certain skills which are like, for example, manual computing. I mean, calculations. Today, machines can do that, or certain repetitive tasks which were done earlier by human beings.
Yes.
In these assembly line processes. And now this is all robots which are doing it.
Yes.
So there are many skills that now need to be brushed off, and the drawers and the shelves have to be dusted
Yes.
in our classrooms.
We need to accept the fact that we are in the sixth wave. There is a fourth industrial revolution going on, and we need to keep pace.
Yes. So then, we are saying that certain skills we don't need and certain skills we will always need, which may be universal or timeless skills. What, according to you, then would be those timeless skills?
So, timeless skills would be basic literacy and numeracy, enough to be able to help you educate yourself or to learn. Then there would be things like communication, creativity, critical thinking,
True.
problem solving, resilience, ethical judgment, emotional intelligence. I think these are skills which will never die.
True.
Will always be required by humanity.
Right. Also, maybe perhaps now we need to go towards what skills have become redundant, which we could say are fossils now
In education.
in education.
Yeah.
And in our classrooms, what do we need to, how do we identify those? So perhaps we can make a list or go through some of those skills which we feel are no longer required in our classrooms.
Yeah, I think it's important we identify it for our listeners.
So I think the first one would be textbooks, according to yes, because all this textbook centric learning, not that textbooks are not important at all. They may be good guides for certain teachers in schools in many contexts, but it can't be textbook centric. The other point probably would be rote learning based on those, again, the textbooks, or memorizing facts without understanding, just regurgitating them in exams, etc. Also, I think the overemphasis on purely theoretical knowledge. Uh, it may be important, but if the children or young people do not understand its application in the real world, then what's the point of all that theory? And I think another skill that I feel now we don't need is, for example, how to consult a dictionary or an encyclopedia.
Yeah.
Because your search engine does it for you.
Yeah. I don't think children of the present generation have seen an encyclopedia because everything is available online.
True.
So, these were related to textbooks. I would like to add certain manual learning skills. For example, manual math calculations to some extent have become redundant. Then manual graph drawing, reference searching manually, that has completely become redundant.
Rent.
Also, to some extent, I would say even cursive handwriting,
Hmm.
because if you're eventually going to type, maybe cursive handwriting.
I haven't really read any books written in cursive. It's always typed font.
Actually, typing will also eventually become redundant because now it is voice
And voice people who have difficulties. Let's say if you are differently able, you have difficulties in writing or spellings, etc. You have voice notes, and that gets transcribed pretty well.
Absolutely. So that repetitive manual tasks, somewhat what we saw in the third wave and perhaps a little bit in the fourth wave, that is almost going to come to an end now.
So this also means that a lot of teaching methodologies need to be looked at, because some of them, some of the things that we used in our classrooms earlier are gone now.
Yes.
For example, overhead projectors.
Never heard of it in the last 8-10 years, I think.
Then also a very rigid time management, or the static seating arrangements, because now we need to have collaborative kind of seating arrangements. So we also need all those subject driven fixed silo-driven kind of methodologies, that you have your maths period, you have your English period, and now some other, physical education period. Now with the NEP, and even the need is to make connections between knowledge bodies.
We have to cross map the curriculum.
Yes, so we'll have all of these things. Earlier there was a lack of peer learning. It was all individual learning. It was highly competitive. There was also very uniform learning paths for children. It was always individual. I mean, it was a one size fits all approach. So there was no differential kind of methodologies used. So those old teaching methodologies would have to change. Yes, and even those frequent rote based unit tests. Which children love to talk about. I have to say it in every episode because the amount of children I meet and the parents who are frustrated, children who are unhappy, a child may have a competitive sport, the next day, but the child has to drop out because of some unit test in primary education.
And unit test based on rote memorization.
Exactly.
On top of it.
Exactly. So I think these are things that we have to look at. So I think that skills are no longer now limited to any particular structures or a format. They are also constantly emerging and evolving as the times change. So perhaps we need to now look at what are the new skills which are emerging for making our learners future ready.
So I think we can begin with the learning skills
Yes.
itself.
I think one of the learning skills would be the learning agility, right?
Yes.
The ability to learn, unlearn, relearn, re-explore something. That's become a trend actually. It's just become way of life.
We are doing it at my age, Anju. I am 60 plus. I am still doing it.
Yes, and it's in fact quite enjoyable, isn't it? I love to learn new ways. And that also goes hand in hand with self-directed learning. Yes. So we are, it has become so much more democratic in the sense that it's accessible. Children can learn, or young people or adults like us, we can learn on our own.
Yeah.
And there is also this other skill, I think, in learning skills, which would be important, which is meta literacy. Yes, which would be not just consuming whatever knowledge is there, because there's an information glut also now, but actually understanding what it is, sifting through the diverse kind of things that come your way, having the critical thinking for that particular knowledge, and then moving on with that.
Yeah. So that brings me to digital skills. So there is a whole basket of digital skills which have now become very important for every child to acquire. I would just name a couple or so of the most important ones. One is AI literacy. How AI works and how to use it. It has really become very important for every child passing out of school. I would also say human-centered design. Solving problems by keeping real people in mind, or real people and their problems in the center. That has become very important. And aside from that, of course, we have things like virtual collaboration, ethical AI development, blockchain awareness, cloud computing, etc. These also are important. So there is a whole basket of these skills.
Right. There's also, of course, a socio-emotional skills.
We both consider to be the most important.
It's really at the heart of all a successful, not a successful, but a meaningful human life, isn't it?
Yeah.
And they haven't been present in our classroom. They haven't been till now given that much of importance.
Yeah.
In fact, it was always telling a child, well, if you're feeling sad, forget about it. If you're angry, we didn't explore why children are coming with that baggage into the classroom. So actually helping children develop their understanding about their own emotions, learning how to deal with your own emotions, self-awareness. The emotional intelligence is a very important part of actually even resilience, which we need now. We're talking a lot about it in this century, also in our times. Along with that, I think is also this cross-cultural competency. In a globalized world, we are having to deal with people of different nations, of different cultures. So children have to be able to navigate, respect each other's cultures, have an openness also of mind. And along with that, again, goes a whole range of interpersonal skills. Yeah. Because if you are very good in theory, you can write very well, etc., whatever, but you don't get along with people, then how are you going to be working in an organization? So all these things are built at a younger age for children from their classrooms.
And that brings me to management skills. Now, one would say that management skills, why are we talking about them at school education level? But actually, this whole idea of entrepreneurship and design thinking, it has to be integrated at school level itself, probably in the secondary stage. And NEP also wants that vocational education, entrepreneurship, etc., is taught from middle stage actually, and not just the secondary stage. That said, financial literacy, legal literacy, citizenship literacy, these things have become very, very important. Other management skills like time management and innovation management is something which every child will come across in their work life.
So, what is innovation management?
This is understanding how to manage new ideas. Okay. How to nurture new ideas, how to manage new ideas, where to take them, how to bring
Very
them to
interesting.
their final fruition or, their final product, and how to manage new ideas in a team, in an organization. So it's a very, very interesting field.
Geez, wonderful. There is also something about environmental awareness, isn't it? Because that's becoming such an important need. What do you think about that?
So environmental awareness, that, this whole idea of sustainability awareness, of global awareness, it is really important that we integrate this in our children's education from K to 12th, from preschool to secondary stage,
Yes.
in various ways, in grade appropriate, age appropriate manners. Yeah.
Yes, because it's not just a skill that you can learn overnight. It has to become a way of life. You understand the different things. You know what is the impact of whatever we are consuming and our lifestyle, etc.
Anju, I must give you an example. When my daughters were getting married, and for their reception, we had, we had a caterer and we had this entire food thing going. And both of them put their foot down on plastic bottles. They also wanted eco-friendly, plates, etc. It was actually a nightmare because we are still not awake to it. So we do not have those kind of vendors. And I think we need to awaken ourselves to it, to become aware of it. My children brought it to my notice, and we tried our best, whatever we could do with the limited resources. So I think children are actually going to change it. Our generation has been little lackadaisical in this. Yeah.
Yes, I think, and we are hopeful about that.
Yes.
So that's really a lovely example about sustainability that you gave, Anita, which also means that we all have to make our individual choices because ultimately we are interconnected in this global world. And that, I think, brings us also to this idea about the importance of mental health and well-being, which is a very important skill because uh, you have to take care about what you eat, what is your life purpose, your work, having a work and life balance, being mindful about and being present to things that you're doing.
It is actually laid down as one of the 18 most important skills that every child must acquire. It is laid down in the NEP in para 4.23.
This is incredible because this is such an important thing. That's why I am very passionate about this particular, many of the aspects of NEP, which are now in sync with the times, with the changing times. So, what would be then the mandatory skills which are laid down in NEP, which are important for us?
So, amongst the 18 mandatory skills, there are various life skills such as critical thinking, communication, creativity, collaboration, etc. Then there are learning skills like digital literacy and meta literacy, information literacy, environmental literacy, gender literacy, citizenship literacy, etc.
Right.
And then there are, of course, certain life skills also, such as self awareness and empathy and, cultural awareness, etc. So, 18 skills which are laid down. It is also laid down that at every stage, in an age appropriate, grade appropriate manner, it is to be integrated.
Right. So, I think it would be important for our teachers and listeners to know how can these be integrated into the classroom.
So I would put it down very simply that they can be integrated through the use of huge amount of innovative pedagogies, not just one pedagogy, but several pedagogies, then through formal assessments and through the understanding that we have to have holistic education with a multidisciplinary approach. But that brings me to the question, Anju, you are a teacher. How do you integrate these skills in your classroom?
Okay, so let me take a very simple example because all schools don't have the same resources. And this is, as a teacher trainer, very often I meet with that constraint. that, okay, we don't have so many resources. So what can we do? So you mentioned about environmental awareness. So let's take that because that is common to everybody. Everybody needs to learn that. And I also spoke about individual choices. So let's say if the children could now begin by thinking about what am I consuming? How many packets of biscuits or other things am I consuming in my life? Or how much of water am I using during the day? So they begin by first self-analysis about their own consumption patterns. Then they can start doing interviews of their own classmates. Then they can also look in their own school community. Who is consuming what? How is the waste generated? Where is that waste going? So that will bring in a lot of, skills for surveys. So if I have to do a survey, if I have to interview somebody, then I have to write down the questionnaire. So I have to write down the language for it. I have to know how to approach somebody. Then if I have to gather the data, I have to be observant. I have to talk to people. I have to take down notes in a scientific protocol. Then with that data I can make graphs, I can make analysis. So you can do in a multidisciplinary way things which are related to science, language, sustainability, life skills. I feel that they can be integrated when children are involved in the real time, in real action.
So this becomes student centric, learning centric rather than teaching centric or teachers.
Yes, and from there, children can think about, okay, what can I do to change my consumption pattern, or let's say my school's consumption pattern, or reduce wastage in my school. Now, if they're going to do that, then they're going to make a design cycle. They're going to create a solution for it. So even if it's a hypothetical one, or it may be a real one, you're going to learn the entire ideation of a project. Like what you said is, the innovation of it goes from here to there. So children are going to project themselves into the future. They're going to think about all the steps and processes which are required. What is this doing? This is basically empowering the child to become active, to to think about their own life, their own community. It is centered in real time, in real world. That's how we can build real life skills. Real life skills cannot be built by doing bullet points on a blackboard. It has to be built in action. Yes. And so I think these are just simple things that children can actually be engaged in schools and easy to put into place. Doesn't require any huge infrastructure change or anything. It just kids going out and observing, note taking, thinking, ideating. Amazing. So I think, yeah, let's think now about some sort of a survival guide. If schools are to now quickly change, what do we think would these institutions and schools need to do in terms of changing skills?
So, for the ultimate skill survival guide, I would firstly say that teachers would need to and schools would need to identify the redundant skill sets in teaching and learning process and stop using them. I would say, छोड़ो कल की बातें, कल की बात पुरानी. So we need to stop using the redundant skills.
Right. And I think along with that, identify the new skills which
Yes.
they need to integrate into their classrooms.
Yeah, so that would be the second point. And the third point I would say is that we have to embrace the chaos and the uncertainty. We have to accept that change is now at a very fast pace. Transformation is at your doorsteps. So we have to start the the implementation of lifelong learning in our own lives and in the child's life.
Which also means that maybe lastly, the teachers should themselves go out and learn something new. Whether it is, just learning a new skill at any age will increase the brain plasticity. So whether it is learning to paint or dance or maybe ride a bike or swim or learn digital, media, it would be very helpful for teachers to learn that on their own. And now a lot of things are actually available online, offline. They can actually upgrade their knowledge in learning these new skills.
Yes, and I think with these 4 items in our basket, survival is possible.
In this change, I'm hoping it'll go from survival to thrival, if I can use that.
Yes.
Then now we should now, towards the end of the podcast, let's think of a little takeaway challenge quiz for our viewers. I think let's see if the viewers feel that they're future ready. So the challenge quiz is this. Which skills in your toolkit are gathering dust? Number 1. Number 2, what are the new skills that you are curious about? Number 3, do you think you can explain artificial intelligence to a grandparent? or somebody older in your community? Do you panic when the Wi-Fi drops? And do you think you can collaborate virtually without asking for help at every step? So this is just a small takeaway quiz for you. We hope you enjoyed today's episode on skilling for the next wave of innovation. Stay tuned to Neptunes and keep following us on social media handles. Like and subscribe. Thank you very much. Wish you all the best.
Thank you.